Alright, welcome along coaches and wannabe coaches. Time for another little session on techniques to use with coaching. And today we're going to talk about the naive enquirer. It's a technique that comes from Socrates or Socratic method. And simply put, it's about becoming very naive about someone's issue and asking questions as if you don't understand anything that they're saying. And this is done to challenge what they believe by making them explain it and prove it to you without actually telling them that they're wrong. And it's a great method for using when you're coaching because it will challenge you, especially when you agree with their belief and you challenge it anyway through naive inquirer. Basically, this is what you use as a coach whenever somebody makes a truthful claim, a statement of fact, a belief that they state, that you can see is probably somehow unhelpful for them, what we call a limiting belief. Okay, so they believe in something to be true, and because they believe that, they're not doing the right thing that they need to be doing. So whenever you spot that, it's time to become the naive inquirer. And so I'm going to give you just a brief overview of how to use that approach today. And if you're not a coach, you can use this on anybody that you're trying to help without having to actually tell them how to live. So you want to start with the assumption mentally that they are wrong, okay? Because we're all wrong. That's the whole Socratic approach. Socrates is famous for saying the only thing we know for certain is that we know nothing for certain. So he always had this approach, according to Plato, where whenever he spoke to someone, whatever they said was almost certainly untrue, and he would try to pick it apart like that by asking questions and challenging all the assumptions in the argument. So essentially what you're doing is you're playing devil's advocate against their belief because their belief doesn't help them. Okay. Now there's three principles to this that I use that I find very helpful in sessions. One is to define the terms. Two is to ask them to provide a cause and effect rationale for their belief. And then three is to explore the exceptions. So number one, define the terms. What that means is any words they use that are significant to their belief, you ask them to define what those words mean. This serves a couple of purposes. One is you will attach your meaning to their words and they might have a different meaning. So it's important for you to be able to put your meaning aside and work with theirs. And this is just a coaching principle in general. Whenever somebody says what you might call a highly emotional or a significant, important word, you need to know what they mean by that word and not assume that it means the same as what you would mean had you used that word. So like if someone was to say to me like, oh, I really need to get into a relationship. I'd say, what do you mean by relationship? Okay, so it seems like a really well-established word that you'll think everybody agrees on it, but their version of a relationship is going to be different to yours. And you need to know what they mean by their version, and they need to know what they mean. Because they might not. They might say, I need a relationship, because they're just programmed by society to want one, and they don't even know what it is. Okay, they don't even know what a relationship is. So you ask them to define any important terms, and often this can be an entire session where just the definition is the problem. I had one client, she said, I need to do things to a certain standard. I'm a perfectionist. I was like, well, what do you mean by certain standard? What is that standard? Half an hour later, we're still talking, we can't figure out what that standard is. So she had made up these words, a certain standard, and yet they had no definition, so it was impossible to achieve, and that was her problem. She'd set up a standard that didn't exist, so she could never achieve it. So define all the terms, and once you've done that, you want to pull out the statements of fact that they're making, the assumptions of truth that they're making, and quite often these are hidden behind the scenes. So someone's like, oh, I really struggle to get into a relationship because I'm such a fucking loser, whatever. There's a belief underneath that you must be in a relationship, that's somehow important to life. And so I'm going to challenge that. I'll be like, where's the evidence that says you should be in a relationship? How did you come to that conclusion? What's the logical argument? What's the reasoning behind that? Now, I might personally believe it's good to be in a relationship, but I'm going to challenge myself while I challenge them. Maybe it's not. I'm going to be naive, as if I've never heard this before, as if I'd been raised without relationships and someone saying I need to be in one. I've never heard of it before, so like, why would you need to be in one of those? Tell me about it. Help me understand. And that's actually the main mindset with the Socratic approach. Help me understand you, as if you don't. Because you'll think you do, but you actually don't. You don't understand what they mean because they don't even understand what they mean when it comes to limiting beliefs, okay? So anything they say, I can't go for that promotion because I'm too old. Okay, where's the proof for that? Where's the evidence that led you to the conclusion that age is relevant to going for promotions? Okay, where's the evidence that going for that promotion is important to you? Now, sometimes there will be evidence, and that's what we're looking for. We're looking for what's true here. But a lot of the time, you'll find there's holes in the story. Somebody might say, for example, oh, I can't tell a girl that I'm attracted to her because, she'll think it's harassment. Yes, there might be some women who think of that as harassment. But why is that relevant to him not going to say hi to that girl? Like, how does he know that that girl is one of those girls? Where did he get the evidence for that? Now, I'm not saying she definitely isn't. I'm saying you're saying she definitely is, so how do you know that? How do you know that for sure? And that's the Socratic approach. Whenever somebody seems to know something for certain, where did they get that certainty from? How was it proven to them? Okay? And then when they start to establish that story, you start to pull it apart with the third principle of looking for exceptions. Where's the exception to this rule? Somebody says, oh, nobody likes me. So I'd say, so nobody's ever liked you. So, well, I had one friend in high school. Okay, so how come you were able to have a friend in high school if nobody likes you? There's an exception there. How do you explain that exception? And quite often I like to keep a list of exceptions in my head. So somebody's like, oh, I'm too old to start a business. I'd say, well, Colonel Sanders started KFC when he was 64. How was he able to do that if age is a factor? And I asked them, like, you've made a statement of fact here where you claim that this thing is always true. So how do you explain this exception? And most importantly, I'm looking for exceptions in their own life. Somebody says, like, I never stand up for myself. Well, tell me about one time where you did. And there's always a time. And when I was 21, my mum tried to make me go to university, but I said no. So, okay, so on one hand you're saying that you can't stand up for yourself, and on the other hand you've got a clear memory of standing up for yourself. What was different about that time? Because in that exception is the recipe for success. If they're able to do it once, they can repeat that. And that's what they need to see. They need to see that this is not. Essentially, what Socratic inquiry is about is taking a belief that's 100% down to like 99, 98, 97, opening that little window of opportunity to say, look, this is not always true all the time. There are exceptions to this, and you can repeat those exceptions. You can create those exceptions. How can you do that? Always looking for the possibility of could, not the impossibility of couldn't. Okay? So that's the naive inquirer. It's a very powerful approach. You could use that as a complete coaching tool all by itself. It takes lots of practice. And I really recommend you learn about cognitive biases to add flavor to this ability. Essentially, don't believe anything anyone says. Question every term. Question every conclusion. Ask how they explain the exceptions. And you can break through limiting beliefs. I'll see you next time.